But we begin tonight with a mantra best summarized by the great Robert Nesta Marley. Your worst enemy could be your best friend, and your best friend, your worst enemy. Which brings us to one of Donald Trump's most important hires, a hire he now seems to bitterly regret, Michael Cohen. For 12 years, Cohen was Trump's personal attorney, known as Trump's fixer, his pit bull, and one of his go-to surrogates when Trump entered politics.
There's no shakeup. I mean, look at the words that you use and you blast at the bottom in your banner. Shakeup, overhaul, dramatic, desperate measures. There are no desperate measures.
So you say it's not a shakeup, but you guys are down. And it makes
Says
sense
who?
that there would...
Says
polls,
who?
most of them. All of them?
Says who?
Polls. I just told you. I answered your question.
Okay. Which polls?
All of them.
His loyalty was nearly boundless, to the point where Cohen once said he would have taken a bullet for Trump. Who else would have taken out funds from his own home equity loan to make a $130,000 hush money payment to a porn star on Trump's behalf so she would stay quiet about their alleged one-night stand? And who else would have gone to prison because of those very acts protecting the boss? But then when Cohen got indicted and convicted for that payoff and went to jail, and unlike other Trump cronies like Trump Organization business manager Alan Weisselberg or Trump campaign overseer Paul Manafort, who we'll get to a bit later in the show, Cohen wasn't all too happy to do time for the Donald. Instead, he had his mea culpa moment and came clean. In fact, his testimony to Congress in 2019 is what set off the criminal trial that Trump is facing today.
I am providing a copy of a $35,000 check that President Trump personally signed from his personal bank account on August 1st of 2017, when he was President of the United States, pursuant to the cover-up, which was the basis of my guilty plea, to reimburse me, the word used by Mr. Trump's TV lawyer, for the illegal hush money I paid on his behalf. This $35,000 check was one of 11 check installments that was paid throughout the year while he was president.
And as you would expect, Trump no longer holds Cohen in such high regard, calling him a rat and a liar. Since 2019, Cohen has not only continued to tell all in interviews, podcasts, and his own books and podcasts, he's remained consistent in his story, perhaps the most consistent of anyone regarding these events. And on Monday, he will begin telling that story again to the 12-member jury in Trump's hush money election interference trial in New York City, perhaps the most anticipated witness in this case. It is expected that he will remain on the stand for most of the week and is one of only 2 remaining witnesses for the prosecution. It's expected that when Trump's lawyers get their chance to cross-examine Cohen, they will try to do to him what they tried to do to Stormy Daniels, attacking his credibility and going on the attack. Expect them to call him a liar and a criminal and someone who can't be trusted. But the problem is, he lied. But for Trump, he committed crimes for Trump. And the reality is, just about everything Cohen will likely say next week will have already been corroborated through documentary evidence and other witness testimony provided over the past 3 weeks. That is what we saw today in the courtroom, with multiple witnesses who were brought in to verify various pieces of evidence likely to be used next week. There were analysts for AT&T and Verizon brought in to authenticate phone records relating to Cohen's cell phone and that of Keith Davidson, Stormy Daniels' former lawyer, and former Trump Organization Chief Financial Officer Alan Weisselberg. 2 paralegals from the Manhattan DA's office were brought in to testify about some of then-President Trump's social media postings that prosecutors say were an effort to influence Cohen and other people he was concerned could cause him legal problems. They also introduced phone and business records, including a summary chart of the 11 invoices, 12 vouchers, and 11 checks that make up the 34 business records prosecutors allege were falsified. Which brings us back to where we started. That Michael Cohen may very well be Trump's most dangerous hire, because he is now the witness that knows everything, where the proverbial bodies are buried and who buried them. And Trump knows it. Joining me now is Lisa Rubin, MSNBC legal correspondent, and Andrew Weissman, MSNBC legal analyst and former federal prosecutor. Thank you both for being here. Lisa, did I properly summarize what happened in court today?
You did. It was a not very eventful day, and yet a consequential one at the same time, because summary witnesses, as Andrew probably knows better than just about anyone, are a really effective vehicle for helping the jury understand lots of data that otherwise they would have to synthesize and compile themselves and may not be able to do so. A summary witness is what allows you to sort of connect the dots, sometimes in a helpful visual format. And that's exactly what happened today. That one exhibit that shows the 34 different documents that are alleged to have been falsified and which count of the felonies alleged they correspond to and whether they're a ledger or a check or an invoice. Count on the jury to rely upon that and look at it again and again as they deliberate. That's the sort of thing that will be an immensely helpful tool for them, even if it was dull for folks like me to listen to in court.
And you did it so we didn't have to. You know, Andrew, I kind of think of these cases, these trials, and tell me if I'm wrong, as a former prosecutor, it's kind of like the 3-6-3 in a movie, right? You have to start the journey, right? And so you have to get these initial witnesses on, people like David Pecker who kind of set the stage and make it make sense. And then you have like the dynamic escalation. Stormy Daniels. You get to the heart of the thing he wanted to suppress, the thing he didn't want people to know, and you got that drama. Well, now we get to the dynamic estrangement. This is him versus the guy who used to be his guy. They were building up to this moment.
Well, this is inherently dramatic. And we have so many examples in our history of this. I was thinking about John Gotti from, my background is John Gotti, the boss of the Gambino family, and Sammy Gravano, his underboss. In Enron, there was Andy Fastow, the chief financial officer, who turned state's evidence against the CEO, Ken Lay, and Jeff Skilling. More recently, you just talked about Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, who was his number two, flipping. There's something inherently dramatic. There's something where you have sort of a broken loyalty that goes on. You have to deal, as a prosecutor, with sort of those conflicted emotions of the witness because they once were very close. But there's nobody, as you said, who knows the inside details better. But you're dealing with somebody who's an insider in a sort of criminal conspiracy. That means, by definition, they have baggage because they committed crimes with the defendant. So, as we used to say, it cannot be the case when you're arguing to a jury, it cannot be the case that you get to commit crimes and then you say, but you called my conspirator to the stand, so I can't be guilty because you can't believe that person. So, the prosecution is doing what you're supposed to do, which is, as you said, they have amassed so much corroboration. I mean, to me, it's almost if Michael Cohen doesn't say, what we all anticipate, that would be the implausible thing. Because I think in many ways, the jury just wants to hear it, but they already know it.
And I mean, Lisa, you've been in there every day. And I mean, if you think about it from the standpoint of the jurors, assess the job that the prosecution has done in telling this story, because they need to lay out there's some lurid details, but those aren't really the point. The sex wasn't the point, right? They had to prove that these business records were falsified. How well have they done building up to telling that story? Because that's what Michael Cohen has to attest to.
Well, the falsification of the documents themselves, they have documented and papered extensively. However, think about it as making a 12,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, right? And those pieces are scattered all over the table right now. So when you're asking me, how well have prosecutors drawn that narrative? It's their closing argument that's going to allow me to answer that question. All the pieces of the puzzle are on the table. Whether the jury can connect them yet is harder to say, particularly when they deliberately interrupted some of the duller testimony with some of the more fiery moments to make sure that the jurors stayed engaged. So, for example, Stormy Daniels' testimony didn't come narratively in terms of the chronology here. They interrupted the people who were testifying about the falsification of business records to bring you the story of Stormy Daniels, right? But they're going to bring it all together in their closing arguments, and I believe their building blocks are very much there.
Let's give it a little preview of what you can expect. But the jury, I mean, we don't get to hear it. I am incensed that we don't get to hear this trial. Honestly, it's not being televised. So we're just going to play you a little bit more. Y'all who watch the show know we've had Michael Cohen on a lot, but I want to play for it just to hear what kind of a witness he might be. Take a listen.
One of the things that I didn't want to be out there is Michael Cohen credible? Well, everybody's entitled to have their opinion. I believe the answer to that is yes. But I don't even want that question to come up. And so when you start doing, and when you start bringing documents and emails and text messages and other documentary evidence to the table, it's impossible for that statement not to be valid or validated.
He's been listening to you. Obviously, he's been listening to you guys. You've been saying this the whole time, right? It's like every word he says, there's a piece of paper attached to it. So it's not as if he's just going to come on and talk. They've put the paper in front of the jury in advance.
Yes, but this is what so that is absolutely true. And a good defense lawyer is going to nibble around the edges. And let me give you an example of a piece of baggage that is unusual and is going to be difficult. And I'm going to be fascinated to see how the prosecution deals with it.
Yeah.
In the civil fraud trial where there was just a result against Donald Trump, Michael Cohen testified. To be fair, the judge said he was credible and said, I find against Donald Trump and I find Michael Cohen told the truth. However, when Michael Cohen testified under oath, he said, when I pled guilty to one of the crimes I pled guilty to, I lied. I lied to the federal judge when I said I was guilty because I'm not guilty. He then asked that a federal judge to reduce his sentence so he's no longer on what's called supervised release, which is like probation. And the judge says no, because you either lied, according to you, you either lied to a federal judge when you pled guilty, or you were lying to the state judge, but it's one. They can't both be true.
Can that come into this case?
Yes.
It can. Okay.
And the reason is because his general credibility is at issue. But of course, the state's going to say, you know what? Who cares? Maybe he lied in one of those. He's corroborated here.
Right, by everything that's said.
You know, whatever. You know what? Just because somebody has lied in the past doesn't mean he's lying now.
Right.